You're a Taurus moon, Libra, or Taurus sun, Libra moon, Taurus rising.
Wow, double Taurus Libra. That's good.
Double
That's
Gemini,
good too.
double Taurus.
Yeah. So Taurus is like kind of.
Event planning is chaos, startups are chaos. So why not lean in? This is the Power Half Hour, where we share the stories, the laughs, and maybe a lesson or two along the way. So grab a cocktail and let's get started.
Wow!
Cheers!
Cheers, you guys! Wow! Oh my gosh! I'm already making.
Marley, welcome to the Power Half Hour.
Thank you so much. It's beautiful to be here with you all.
I'm so excited to catch up with you and hear all about your incredible life. We have known each other for a few years.
I mean, I feel like probably 19 or 18, 17,
Yeah,
15, somewhere.
We're
around
going
there.
on the teens for sure. Cheers to that.
It's been a while. Cheers.
We aren't discriminating as we drink.
You're good.
Marley is drinking water, so if you are in the mood of hydrating versus libating,
Yes.
gross.
Libating.
I'm here for the party.
Yeah.
And we are watching on this Power Half Hour movie clips that are changing on the minute. So far, we've had Star Wars.
We're on to Lilo and Stitch now.
My gosh.
And Marley, without a drop of alcohol, is already making a mess. So.
Spilling water everywhere.
I was also thinking, so when we're here to talk about all sorts of things, but wellness, the way it is and isn't incorporated in our industry. And as we are doing this, I thought it would be really good to do this with Liquid IV because I, especially like as I'm prepping for a Vegas show, you know, you go in and you are like a raisin. You know, 24 hours in, it is like you cannot drink enough water.
Yeah.
And I finally realized the last time that if I actually start my day with a Liquid IV, and carry my water bottle around and hydrate the entire day, I survive. I still don't feel great, but like you cannot hydrate enough when you are doing a 7-day show in Las Vegas. It's impossible.
And electrolytes do matter.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, all of it matters. And also like the fact that that's what we do as an industry.
Yeah.
Like surviving that is really physically, mentally, and emotionally kind of challenging, I would say, right?
Which is kind of like the subcontext of part of the conversation we want to have, which is like the job event professionals do, whether you are a cook in the kitchen, you are a sales manager who is out there enjoying company and cultivating relationships, or you are working the events
The
as
meeting
an
planner,
event
the
meeting planner.
vendor.
Like we do some miles. Like there is a step count on site. There is a step competition. Like on average, for most programs that I'm doing, I am averaging a half marathon per day.
Yes.
And that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And that takes a toll on your body.
Absolutely. And how do you both perceive the industry relative to, personal well-being and personal well-being practices?
Yeah, Rocio.
First, let's cheers to Kill Bill.
To Kill Bill.
Kill Bill. Gosh, I love her. Uma's so cool.
Oh, so good. But when you and I first started talking about this episode, the first thing I thought of was our one of Folio's core values, which is work hard, work healthy. Because in order to be successful in this industry, like we do have to be on a ton. So I think the best thing that we can do are baby steps, calling awareness in the ways that make sense, in a way that people are going to be able to hear, right? You have to meet people where they are at on their journey. And so if their journey is switching out Topo Chico for a Liquid IV, fantastic. Like I am happy to meet you there. If you on the journey is, I cannot even conceptualize not having a cookie at 3:00 in the afternoon. Okay, maybe I'll like sneak you a oatmeal raisin cookie so you at least get a little fiber.
Sure.
Versus one of my very good friends who left the industry because she wanted to pursue health and wellness, found herself back doing meetings and events. And the way she puts her guardrails in place is she knows what she wants to do. She identifies where she wants to be able to travel, how she wants to live her life, and she backfills what she needs from there.
Wow.
Yeah, like
Great boundaries.
Yeah.
I love
No, she's
that
great.
so much. I have so many thoughts on this topic, and I feel like we have to drink again.
Yes.
So now I'm really following the rules, which is rare for me.
I love that.
But I was just in San Francisco, and I was fortunate to join a panel with Dr. Renee Lertzman, who is a climate psychologist,
Mhm.
and Alia Kanso, who is the sustainability manager for the Golden State Warriors. And it was put on by the Society for Sustainable Events. And what was different about it is that we were talking entirely about well-being and the importance of climate psychology as it relates to
Sure.
having conversations around sustainability within our industry. And it's been really wild because I feel like people are saying there's so many resources out there in terms of like education. I have my own accreditation. You know, there's a lot there to unpack, but not as many people talking about the complexities of the psychology.
So if I'm understanding you correctly,
Layers.
you are defining sustainability slightly differently because there is a relationship to the overall wellness and well-being as a part of that definition. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think in my work, having a sustainable event strategy company for the last 3 years, I have noticed, a disconnect between the intentions of industry professionals and the understanding of sustainability, and kind of been really curious as to why that is.
Ooh,
Well,
yes.
you hear it on site all the time, right? Like everyone wants to not eat 3 o'clock cookie.
Right.
You know, everyone wants to be like, I'm going to stay healthy this program. And then you get on site and it's just like, I can't not eat enough.
Right. How quickly does that all go out the window? And where does that fall in the conversation from your planning as well, right? Because your stakeholders hear sustainability and they're like, great, that's some extra money I got to spend to make sure I recycle better. And then we as event professionals are like, there's so many more layers to that. Like, what is your strategy? What are you trying to accomplish? And like, it's such a heady, large topic that like, where do you get in?
Totally. And I think in our conversation, I talked deeply about this past fall. I had probably the hardest time of my life personally. I called it my dark night of the soul. I've had many ego deaths. Call it all.
Oh, I
good.
love ego.
Yeah, they're
Marley.
so good. They're so good, but they're so bad at the same
I
time.
know, right?
Sure.
And but what I traced it to was that I was stuck in the processing of grief around the work I'm intending to do, and then the way I feel like it's actually being received or impacting the world. I was stuck in sort of anger and depression, 2 stages of grief. And I'm a big proponent of feeling feelings. And I think, relative to the work we do, it is so important that we really be taking time for ourselves when we're talking about being on site, when we're talking about, engaging with multi-stakeholders. Like, what is it that we need, in order to bring the best version of ourselves to these conversations, whether they be about climate and sustainability or they just be about what you're trying to achieve strategically for this conference?
So we've seen some things on site that are like, here is support dogs that are brought in.
Yes.
Here is a meditation room.
Yeah.
The conference that I just did was a company kickoff, and they, during the lunch hour, had guided meditation during that lunch hour.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some stigma around some of that, right? That like they were recruiting people to go do meditation at this company kickoff because it has that woo-woo-ness about it, right?
Yeah.
And there is a piece of where we are at as both an industry and a corporate culture that isn't acknowledging that for some reason, right?
Yeah, I mean, I admittedly I'm as woo-woo as you can really get, but I think it's interesting because it's about recognizing individuals' divergence of thought and perspective, right? So maybe not everybody's into meditation, but how can you do a survey beforehand to really gauge what are the activities that the group would be really interested in, instead of trying to force people into things that they may or may not have comfort in.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think so much about sustainability and about well-being is really about engaging with people, and really strategically incorporating these aspects of environmental mitigation and consciousness before the event even begins. And it's sometimes easier said than done, but I like the well-being and wellness intention that is happening, but it needs to come from a place of authenticity and like truly of understanding the people.
Yeah.
Like, what are the real people that are coming, not the attendees or the label of like,
Yep.
these imaginary attendees that we really don't know. Like, what do they actually want?
Yeah, well, and that goes back to ego, right? Like you have some shareholders who are very, very well intentioned. They want to make sure that they're putting on all of these health and wellness initiatives at their events. They have an entire room with puppies, right? Like they think it's the best idea ever, but they haven't really listened to hear like, I'm sorry, your investment bankers are never going to go into the puppy room. And no matter how well intentioned you are, it's not going to land with that audience. So then you're dealing with the ego of the shareholder who genuinely believes that they're doing the right thing, but can't really see past their own goodness or good intentions to say, like, that's actually doing the opposite because now I've invested a ton of time and resources into something that isn't going to do what it's intended to do. And it has the opposite negative effect, which goes back to like we said this on the first episode. Have you seen A Good Place?
No.
It's this whole Netflix series with Kristen Bell. I spoiled it for somebody already. Point being, there's a whole theme of like, what do you do, and what are the intended effects versus the actual effects. It's hilarious. You should watch it. But basically, like you go to purchase an organic apple, and you think you're doing the right thing, but then it's like, well, I drove an extra 2 miles out of the way to get to the Trader Joe's to get the organic apple, so like my carbon footprint actually didn't matter. That's all of that to say. So domino effects. And for those of you who are on audio only, Marley's doing great with the power half hour. We're watering the ground right now.
Yeah,
It's
I've
great.
spilled a lot of water.
But back to the kind of both the grief and the intentionality piece of what you said. Thank you for sharing that last year was not, the bright moment of the year. And I think there's a level of, not to use a Brene Brownism, but the leaning inness of that to kind of have to be self-aware enough of yourself to own that and bring it forth.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a big blocker for a lot of people, and respectable. You have to meet people where they're at, but like the intention behind an afternoon meditation is self-awareness.
Yes.
And if that's not the space your company is at, and not the environment and the culture that you've created, it's never going to land, right?
Right. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's so much power in being able to intentional evolution is like my favorite term for the year, because it's like when we can look within and see the roots in which are causing our, nervous system reactions. It's not that we have to relive our trauma or we have to go into the past, into these hard scenarios, but literally just allow that emotion or whatever it is to just live its life through you. So the way I view it is so much energetically that we can
Sure.
get things stuck. And an example is I actually had this fascia body worker, and
Hold on, for those who don't know, me included, what's a fascia body worker?
So within your body, basically the fascia are the kind of like soft parts of your muscle. It's a lot of like the somatic nerve endings throughout. And so when you get a fascia release, it will go into all these different, it's really like a deep tissue massage.
Oh, that's why I was feeling like garbage this morning.
Just released all your fascia.
I did, no.
Totally.
Is that the proper usage of fascia?
Yeah, fascia,
Totally.
totally. But I had a scenario where he touched a specific part on my back, and it literally took me exactly back to this moment in time in college. It was a very traumatic experience. And it was just such a proof to me of like, because I had done a lot of conscious work around it, but it still lived in my body.
Yes.
So that's like kind of the energetic lens that I like to look at these things
Oh,
with.
no.
But it's like,
I haven't done that much work. That means I'm going to have surprises.
No, it's all in right timing, right? Like it's all in divine timing, and we don't have to force it. It comes for us,
Divine timing. I love that.
Absolutely.
Which as we are approaching some of the like, you're going to a busy conference or you're starting your planning cycle. I think that is a like intentionality of how we as event professionals, or intentionality for you are attending a conference and doing more steps than you used to, or you're used to, like what are some tactics and strategies that come into like how you prep for that event, or like knowing what you know, how can you better ready your body for a big experience?
And I'm gonna take your question one step further.
Sure.
Can we do like a very, very new talk to me like a kindergartner version, and then because we're events professionals, right? We have a lot of people who have really dipped into the woo woo but haven't.
Totally.
So kind of like your very beginner mode and then advanced.
Yeah. So I have a podcast that is about inner work that goes deep into a lot of wild subjects called The Blueprint Within. But one thing I like to do with kids and with all different types of people is just the full body yes no experience.
Sure.
Ooh.
And it's basically think of the happiest moment of your life and just close your eyes and think of the happiest moment of your life.
Okay, we're gonna do it right now.
And sit in that moment.
I have so many.
And breathe in as deep as you can, but then where does that live in your body? Where do you feel it? And that is your yes.
Okay.
So that is like your somatic yes. That's your body's version of telling you yes when your mind isn't so sure of what is going on. And basically you can do the reverse, and we don't have to do the reverse because we're having a good time, but it's like think of like a really hard or challenging moment, and that lives usually in a different place in your body.
Okay, but no, I want to do it. Okay, but can we talk about, can we do the first one? Like, where did you feel it, Greg?
To me, I don't know if this was because I was also listening to the TV, but it was like in or behind my ears.
Wow, I love that.
So in the head space,
That's
which to me
amazing.
makes sense.
Yeah,
like,
totally. Double Taurus makes sense.
Double Taurus.
Prior to starting the episode, we all went through our astrological signs.
Yeah, I'm a big astro believer.
I didn't feel anything. Like I was, to your point, I've also been really trying to feel my feelings, which is very, very new for me. And I was waiting for it to like show up in my chest or my stomach or somewhere, and I didn't really feel anything. And so I sat and I was thinking about the ship when we won the ship.
Yes.
And then it started to like happen in like the front of my face and like the crown of my head.
Wow.
I don't know.
I love that. And the other thing is like this is not your ideal moment to do that
Sure.
exercise.
Well, sure.
So,
Like we didn't sit with it very
wanna
long.
Just sit,
but-
you know, because you might sit with that for 5 minutes and just see. And I'm a big believer in like breathing into breathing into your heart space to like ask questions and introspect.
But let's break that down.
Yeah.
So how does one breathe into their heart space?
So a signal of like being in fight or flight is having very shallow breathing, which I realized for a long time until I started intentionally breathing. I would breathe almost like to, you know, the like the top of my lungs and almost not. And so when you really think about breathing into your diaphragm, like all the way to the bottom past your lungs into your diaphragm, that is like deep breathing.
Yeah.
So when I'm breathing in my heart, I'm not going as deep. It's like not the full breath, but I believe so much lives in the heart, and the heart is where my yes is. So like my heart bursts when I think of my yeses. My throat closes when I think of my no's.
Sure.
Yes.
So it's like when you're on site or even in any scenario, like you can also lean into your body when maybe your mind is giving you a lot of feedback or interference or any kind of resistance to something.
And the application of that is to be self-aware, to have that exercise going into the big week ahead, to be able to establish the boundaries surrounding that, right? Like we know as event professionals, we're going to be pushed to our limits in some way, shape, or form as we are executing the big thing that we've been working on, right? Or we know that there is interaction with a stakeholder who really rubs us the wrong way. And what comes into being able to identify that, set the intentionality around it, and then also respect the boundary in those high stress situations.
Sure. Your job is on the line, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you respect your boundary when your job is on the line?
Totally. And I think that having empathy for yourself and giving yourself grace, those words are used so commonly that I think sometimes we almost like lose track of what
Sure.
that means. But that means, you know, setting aside time for yourself and self-care and evaluating the idea of self-love and pleasure and giving your body the things that it wants, whether that be food, exercise, or otherwise. I mean, sexual pleasure. I mean, I don't know if that's allowed on the Power Hour. I think
Absolutely
that's
it's
where
allowed
things
on the
get
Power
really
Hour.
wild.
This has been
on
the most
Power.
like PC episode we've had so far.
Oh, good. Oh my God.
Yeah, you can let it out.
Okay, yeah. But just all of those aspects, like really evaluating.
Speaking of pleasure, High School Musical.
High School
Yes.
Musical is on the screen.
Yes.
Vanessa Hudgens, Zac Efron.
But seeing like where, when you think of the concept of like loving yourself,
Yeah.
where is there resistance to that idea?
Yes.
Is there resistance somewhere within a story you were told as a kid, or, you know, something about yourself that doesn't resonate with your truth?
Yep.
And like looking at that and trying to dismantle that and take away that notion, because I think the love for ourselves is how we set more boundaries, healthy boundaries within the work that we do and the stakeholders that we engage with.
Yeah.
And also we don't attach our validity to that stakeholder's opinion of
Yep.
us
That's a
or what we
big
do.
one. And it goes back to something you said at the top of the episode of like, our industry has gone through so many traumatic ebbs and flows between pandemic, budget cuts, corporate layoffs that like we're the first on the chopping block. We're typically non-revenue generating. And like, how do we detach our ego, our like sense of this is my job, this is who I am, from like the reality of like who you are as a person? You are not that shareholder.
Yeah.
You are not just an event planner. No matter how cool the, you know, letters that you have behind your name are, like you are more than that. And like, can you
Absolutely.
hold on to that when someone's yelling at you because the chocolate chip cookie isn't warm enough?
Totally. Wow. And that's such a ruthless yell, right?
Yeah, it is. If you haven't experienced it, I don't know.
No, I like feel that pain. I have not experienced it, and I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry
Um,
about the cookie.
my God.
Whatever inner child you have that needs an apology for the
Yeah.
cookie.
Yeah, and like I just want to say, hurt people.
Yes.
Also.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like that's just part of it. Well, the one exercise that I like to recommend doing is a letter from your 100-year-old self.
Mm.
Oh,
Mhm.
I
So
love
it's
that.
Literally, you're on your deathbed. What do you have to say to yourself in this now moment? Like,
Oh.
and you actually physically write a letter. And
I
that's-
already, speaking of feeling things, I already feel like I felt pride when you said that. Like,
Mm.
I like, so that it feels like means I'm doing something right?
That's beautiful, and
Yeah.
that's exactly like that's what you should feel about a lot of your life, and then also the parts of your life that maybe you've conveniently tried to not see
Mm.
also typically come through.
Yeah, back to this ego conversation, right? Like, do you define ego as neutral, neither good nor bad, right? Everyone has ego.
Yeah,
There's some philosophers or psychologists. I think Kant
I think.
is one that talks a lot
Okay,
about
no one
ego.
fact check that.
Yeah.
We're not
No.
philosophers.
I'm pretty sure.
so I have a lot of feelings about and I think about the conscious, subconscious, and ego minds as all three different separate entities, but ultimately the ego mind is the part that as humans when we're originally created, the part that's telling you don't do that so you don't die.
Yep.
So it's really connected to survival, and change equals danger. Even in our day-to-day, you know, lives now, where really are we ever really in like life altering danger in our day-to-day? Not frequently, right? So the ego is sort of a misguided, often part that's just really trying to keep us alive and safe.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so
Well intentioned.
the way I like
Just
to
trying to
think
keep
of
you
it-
safe. That chocolate chip cookie is going to kill you.
Yeah.
Well, it has the same like
Right.
physiological response in your system.
Yes.
Is if someone is in your face,
Mhm.
pointing a finger at you and demanding, right?
Yes.
Whatever your fight or flight stimulus is going to surface, and you are either going to shut down and run away, or you are going to be combative, and it might not be the appropriate response for the right situation. You know.
Well, and I think every human has like a wound of not being enough or not being worthy due to the mass manipulation of
Yeah.
advertising and
Yeah.
psychology around consumerism in our like current system. But truly, I think the ego is a part of our body. It is us.
Yep.
So like it's also a part that we have to love in the same way and have empathetic, you know, vision and objective kind of witnessing of it without attaching again it to who we are or being like, not villainizing ourselves for what our ego's innocently trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and there's the light and dark of everything, right? Your greatest strength is also going to carry with it some shadow side of the moon to it. So if you are the best event planner out there and you are the most type A organized person, chances are you might not be the most empathetic person, or you might not be able to have
Sure.
a rounded awareness of what your biggest strength and its potential bad side would be, right?
I have a really amazing story to share about that, where I'm an Aries sun, Leo rising, Pisces moon, which we've already talked about.
Yes.
Established.
But I have learned the very hard lesson this year. I'm highly empathetic and I care deeply about people. But I also, being an Aries and like this driven person who I think I'm trying to help people, I've shared my opinions about what I think will help others without asking their permission and without being curious about how they're going to receive it. And I really, frankly, I've learned very hard lessons from that fact. And so now I'm really learning, you have to be curious and more empathetic.
I'm
Holding
gonna hold-
space.
I'm going to hold space
You're
for
gonna hold
that.
space.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I really, I had a couple of friendships.
Thank you.
A couple of friendships lost because of
Yeah.
these scenarios. So it's learning the hard way, but ultimately we have to ask and get that permission to actually come in with some information that may not be, it's from a place of integrity and heart,
Yes.
but maybe it's not what the other person is prepared or wanting to
Sometimes
hear.
your intention doesn't actually matter.
Totally.
Which is hard.
No, but that's true.
It
It's
matters. It matters, but your intention doesn't make it okay for what the person needed in that moment.
Well,
right?
if they do not want, or I mean, and it also each of us has our own lived experience and perspective of what we see the world as and how we see ourselves in it.
One thing that I think Brene Brown does
It's
beautifully
Twilight, I'm sorry.
is establish some of those communication standards, some of those action trigger words, not trigger by triggering, but trigger as here, let's rumble about that,
rumbling.
and that is something that I feel doesn't carry over into corporate all that much.
Sorry, I've never seen Twilight.
Twilight babies were flying in the air. But what are the best practices? Most events teams have an outer circle and a very close-knit inner circle, right? There are 5 people, maybe 2 people in which I'm the one you vent to. Here's where I let my guard down.
Because you've been in the trenches together, right? These aren't relationships that are formed lightly either, which is hard to see from the outside perspective sometimes.
Yep. But we've all A, been there, and B, have seen it, that those can go into doom spirals, very toxic conversations. I'm just gonna vent to you.
Can you believe Marley told me that I should go sit with myself when I told her that I was mad about the budget being over? How dare she? What?
Are there any?
And that's how that's how quickly it happens.
Intentionality setting as small but mighty event planning teams that can generally create a more positive disposition.
For sure. I personally feel that practicing non-judgment and making that a pillar of your foundational organizational culture is critical. And the reason is, when you trace any person's pain and projection of anger, hurt, otherwise, if you trace people's history back, you can find a part along their pathway where they lost their connection to love or belief in themselves, or they've extreme fear or some sort of scenario in which they believed either that they're not good enough, they're not worthy, or basically pain occurred. And so I think with every person's action, you can always trace their life back to a part where you could have deep empathy for that person in that scenario. And if it were you, it would probably similarly affect you. So I think it's so much about not attaching our own validation to another person's actions, words, or, way of showing up, but also as individuals and groups practicing as deep a non-judgment as we can about around each other,
Yes.
our attendees, our stakeholders.
And where does like gratitude come into that? Happiness, like
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like when it is that doom and gloom spiral, like there just isn't sun between the clouds.
Right.
It is just all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I feel like, and it's hard, truly, like Las Vegas is a hard place for me, you guys. Like that
Sure.
place
Yeah,
is tough.
it's hard.
But for me, I think it's like when I go outside, I can look at like the veins on a leaf or like the petals of a flower
Yeah.
and see beauty. And so to me, it's about finding the awe and the magic in the tiny things,
Mm.
because every single person has access to nature. Every single person has access to finding abundance within their life, whether it's like the dinner you're going to make yourself, or the 10 minutes you're going to sit in silence, or the phone call you're going to have with your best friend. Like finding the moments that spark joy and then holding on to that feeling of gratitude and abundance so that it can magnify upon itself.
I heard that you are in control of some of that, right?
Yep.
Like what is the thing that brings you joy?
Yep.
Is that getting back to your room and taking that Fiji water bottle off the minibar and being like, I deserve this,
Right.
Well, I'm going to say, as a
No.
sustainability
yes.
consultant, if
Wrong
you
brand.
need that, make sure you're recycling. But
I always replace the Fiji water bottle.
But what I picked up in that is like the beauty in nature is fantastic, but the irony of talking about like abundance in a place like Las Vegas, and we have to search for it.
Mhm.
Like talk about abundance, overconsumption, like the most unsustainable, most disgusting consumer city in like probably the entire world, and we struggle to find abundance there. Like
yeah.
I immediately went back to like being 21 and flying out to Vegas for my first event for work and thinking like I have made it. Like I got here
Amazing.
for free and I get to expense this $25 hamburger, and it's the best hamburger I've ever eaten, and I get to order it to my room, and it's like at what point do we lose that like awe and like excitement around things that are truly incredible? Like I'm having a cheeseburger in the middle of a desert in air conditioning. Like
Yeah.
Right.
how do we keep those connections?
Well,
Totally.
and your definition of joy changed is what I
Right.
just heard you say.
Yes.
Like the
now
new,
it's I have to eat this
Yeah.
cheeseburger. I have to be here. Like
Mhm.
the new and shiny, the newness has worn off. The glitz and glam has worn off, and we are now left with like,
Yes.
okay, yep, I still am going to walk to Starbucks at 4:00 in the morning because that is where I am able to process information.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Well, and personally, we talked about this before, but meditation for me is such a sanctuary of connection to self. And I know that it feels overplayed a lot of the time, but when you can find that awe or that connection in like the smallest moments, when you're on the way to Starbucks and you're just like, the sun's rising and I'm the
Yes.
only person here and I love the egg white bites. It's going to be amazing. Like
the only person here. Yeah. Meditation doesn't mean sitting in a quiet corner on like a little, pomp somewhere among trees, right? You find meditation where you need it.
Yeah.
Right, and you can be in stillness at any moment with yourself, even in a 5,000 person conference,
Yes.
And I think the other important thing to mention is like not like in a not in an aggressive way, but the squashing of the doom spiral
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is loving and kind, of just not participating in the talking about, judging of others. Like you can be a listener, but also maybe even trying to guide to more positive outcomes, because I think
Sure.
energetically that is also impacting you, whether
Yep.
you want to actually be a participant in it or not.
And I think it goes back to that boundary setting as well of like, if it is your close inner working or inner work sanctum, like if you don't have the space to raise the flag to say like, can we change the subject to something more positive, or even pose it as a question of like, so, what are you looking forward to? Or What is the next trip you're going to take? Like, this has been a heavy conversation. Let's talk about something that's fun and engaging. Like, maybe some introspection is in order, you
Yeah,
know?
and I think too, like the empathy for the people that make mistakes. Like someone made a mistake, so that's how we're complaining about this one scenario. But like, what if there's something going on with that person that we may not know about that's caused them to maybe miss the mark on this one thing that they were supposed to do? So like, also just bringing empathy for the whole experience into more of the forefront for people, because that also kind of stops it in its tracks a little bit.
Yeah, the empathy of I am meeting you where you're at.
Yes.
I see you. I'm holding space for you. I think is a great way to conclude this episode.
Yes.
What is your biggest takeaway?
Assume best intentions and know yourself.
Love that.
Marley, if you could gift meeting planners one thing, what would it be?
Ooh, I would say learn about event sustainability strategy in a way that makes you feel empowered
Yes.
rather than reactive to what's coming. So, and just also viewing change with regard to this as something that will be good for your mental health and well-being and make you feel better about the work you do versus something that's triggering because it is change.
Yeah.